Well, hello, sweet honey pie. Are you ready for this week's weekly dose of higher consciousness quiz? We have a good one for you. My name is Liz Garcia, and I'm your happy host of Trumpeter of Truth Radio.com on my podcast and Trumpeter of Truth TV.com on YouTube. This is the place to discover what I call the foundational basics and essential understandings for raising your level of consciousness and building a better life. And I support this intention by putting power and truth into context based on the map of consciousness, which was developed by Dr. David R. Hawkins, and it's a proven energy scale for actualizing your ultimate potential. So today's quiz, let me tell you what the topics of today's quiz are. Let me look at my little cheat sheet, although I think I do recall. We're taking a look at the energy of calling a spade and what that is. We're also looking at one who would be labeled as an apologist. Take a look at that. And the last one is patriotism or love of country. Which one of these three is of highest consciousness? Now, let me just tell you a little bit about calling a spade a spade. I have it up here on my computer in the dictionary, or was it Wikipedia? Okay, Wikipedia. Oh, Wikipedia. Okay. So calling a spade is a figurative expression, sometimes given as, someone will say, let's call a spade. And when they're saying that, it refers to calling something as it is. That is, by its right or proper name, without beating about the bush or speaking. It's also known as speaking truthfully, frankly, and directly about a topic, even to the point of bluntness or rudeness, and even if the subject is considered coarse, impolite, or unpleasant. So that's what calling a spade is called, and that's how I understand it to mean. An apologist is someone who speaks or writes in defense of someone or something. And then love of country and patriotism doesn't really need any explanation. So those are our three things that we're comparing today on your weekly dose of higher consciousness quiz. Now, I want you to the point of this quiz is to help you align with levels of consciousness and understanding, learning to discern what's true, what's not true, letting go of thinking you know it all, which is really prideful energy, thinking you know it all and wanting to be right and prove others wrong. That's of lower consciousness. Letting that go and accepting that the mind doesn't know it all for sure. And Dr. Hawkins, throughout all of his lectures, is always like dismissing the mind because the mind wants to make up its own garbage about everything, depending on your own level of consciousness, that is. So I want you to think about what's of highest consciousness: calling a spade, being patriotic and loving your country, or being an apologist. So before I get to the answer to that, I kind of want you to just kind of sit with it, feel with it, write it down. What do you think is highest consciousness? Next. And there's a clue in one of those for sure. Okay, I just kind of gave it away, but there is a clue of which one is of the highest consciousness. But before I give you the answer, I'm going to give a plug to the mindbodyspiritnetwork.com, which is our sponsor, which is the go-to place for consciously created and curated online events from visionary thought leaders and luminary healers throughout the world on the topics, anything related to mind, body, spirit transformation. We also consciously curate online courses, tools for personal transformation from experts and best-selling authors as well. So I belong to something called consciousnesscalibrations.com. And I'm also a student of Dr. David R. Hawkins and all of his books into consciousness research. So I do research first to make sure that I'm getting teachers that are of higher consciousness. And if they personally are not of higher consciousness, I like to make sure that which they are teaching is. And it's kind of interesting as I'm looking at, there's a lot of well-known teachers out there whose personal level of consciousness is below 200, yet they teach at a higher level above 200. So it's kind of confirms that we all teach what we need to know. And when I started to see this pattern, it's like, why are all these highly regarded best-selling authors and teachers that are pretty world famous running lower consciousness in their own lives, but able to teach at a higher level? So it's just interesting to look at that. A lot of really well-known teachers and gurus of whatever are running lower consciousness because they're getting involved in the ego and wanting to be right and prove others wrong and think that they're all that. It's pride, and it's money can get in the way, and politics can get in the way for sure. If you get political, you immediately are going to challenge your level of consciousness if you get involved in that downward pulling arena, because politics is of lower consciousness as a generalization. So anyway, and I go to consciousnesscalibrations.com to check on subjects that I can share in the quiz. And I also use Dr. Hawkins' book, which I'll show you right here. This is Dr. Hawkins' book, Truth versus Falsehood, which is an excellent encyclopedia of consciousness calibrations. And Dr. Hawkins passed in 2012. So this consciousness calibrations associate has kind of picked up where he left off and is doing calibrations on present day stuff, which is super interesting. And there was a recent calibration on his website that one of the subscribers asked about. And actually they made a comment, and the comment was, when I read, consciousness calibrations, I feel better, and anxiety, it just feels good to read the calibrations for some reason. And I would agree with the comment of that subscriber. So they asked Brian, who's the gentleman that does the calibrations, he calibrated that, why is it? What's going on there? And the calibration of you going to the, truth versus falsehood, or reading Dr. Hawkins' books, or going to the Consciousness Calibrations website and reading those calibrations is kind of shoring up your energy field and aligning you with the truth. What's truth? Where's power? It's it's a progression levels of consciousness. And doing that calibrates in the 500s, which is huge. That's in the non-linear spiritual domain. To align yourself with the non-linear spiritual domain and intend to want to know the truth is a huge leap in consciousness. And to be in that energy field is super helpful for all of us, just to read them, because you can let go of what the mind thinks and understand what the truth is about anything. So I want to recommend that to you today as well. And it's a low subscription fee, but there's tons of people I send there that want calibrations. And you can't get personal calibrations, but things that are beneficial to everyone that would be reading that, you want to check it out. So I'll get a fair amount of quiz fodder from that website. So anyway, back to the mindbodyspiritnetwork.com. Highly recommend you check that out, because if your intention is to raise your level of consciousness, align yourself with what's true and powerful in your life, that website is developed for that. And in fact, I had Brian calibrate the level of consciousness of all of my websites, the podcast, the video cast, to make sure I'm aligned with higher consciousness. And I was really happily surprised that I am. And I also said, could you please make sure that I'm running at least above 200? I don't need to know my exact calibration. And sometimes you can't typically ask that. But I just said, could you please check and see if I am operating above 200, which is really all that's needed to shift anybody, is to speak the truth at the best level that I can. And that calibrated as true that I was running above 200, and that the websites and podcasts are running between 335 and 350, which is huge. I'm happy to say it's a significant leap in consciousness. And it's a level of consciousness I'm personally working on, which is personal responsibility and accepting that I'm the creator of my own experience. This is the level of 350, which is showing up on the websites and the video cast podcasts. Really interesting to know. So my intentions are panning out, thankfully, because I intend to help shift you in one way or another. So let's look at the consciousness calibrations today. Did you have an idea of what might be number one, what might be number two, what might be number three? So I'm going to start with the lowest level of consciousness. And typically, I haven't been doing a quiz where something is of lower consciousness, but I'm switching that up now. I used to do everything was of higher consciousness, but now I'm adding some lower consciousness because in the absence of calibrations, you wouldn't know any better. And most of the world has no clue about many things that are in the media are of lower consciousness, as an example. Everything in the political arena is of lower consciousness because it's self-serving on many levels and holds no truth. None of it holds truth. It's all garbage. It's a house of cards, really, which is not to say all politicians are politicians. There are many that are actual, real leaders, like, JFK, John F. Kennedy was a true leader. He was a statesman at 450 on the map of consciousness. Most presidents calibrate, like in the past, most presidents have been of higher consciousness, typically closer to the 400s throughout history until recently. So it's good to just kind of put into context where all of this lands. So we're going to start with the lowest level of consciousness, and it kind of relates to politicians, and that is to be an apologist. An apologist calibrates 190 on the map of consciousness, which is of lower consciousness. If someone's being an apologist, what they say and think and write about or speak about really holds no truth because they're operating from this energy field of victimhood. And they're likely have their own victimhood running, and they want to apologize for, and a good example of an apologist is someone who wants to apologize for the United States being the greatest country in the world. And that is not an overstatement, because the United States is the country of, or has been the country of highest consciousness in the world for a long time. That has changed slightly over the last couple of years with all the lower consciousness stuff running in the media and in politics. It has brought the level of consciousness of the country and the world down in general. Coronavirus, all of it, fear-driven crap, fear-mongering, lowers our level of consciousness all over the world, especially when it's broadcast on the news and people are fighting and whatever. So an apologist, I know a recent president that's an apologist for the United States being a powerful country. That's not ideal. And just to put things into context, political correctness calibrates at 180, which is the same level as a politician. And that political correctness is also of lower consciousness, running the whole victimhood thing. Like, no one needs to be, all of us can stand up for ourselves. We really can. We have the power within us to do it. And we don't need someone else to do it for us unless we feel like a victim. So this is not to disparage victimhood, because 85% of the planet operates in victimhood. And I have operated in victimhood for a long time on other topics. So I understand what it feels like. But I also understand now, like, I don't want to be in victimhood. I want to be the creator of my own experience. I understand it's true. So if that's true, I got to take responsibility for my life and stop letting anyone else apologize for me, as an example. I don't need anyone to speak for me, apologize for me. And that's kind of what an apologist does, is speaking for others and apologizing for something that holds no truth. So next in our weekly dose of higher consciousness quiz, next on the map is calling a spade a spade. That energy is of super high consciousness and integrity. And it calibrates at 475 on the map of consciousness. And for people that are running victimhood, political correctness stuff, they're going to feel like, oh, yeah, mean. And it's not being mean. It's holding, it's the sword of truth is what it is. It's a spiritual warrior holding the sword of truth and not going to fall and collapse into political correctness. That's kind of the energy of it. And I get it now. It's like, I don't care, how much you want to be right and prove others wrong. This is like what's going on with the ego. Like, oh, poor me. And I'm like, no, not poor you. It's calling a spade is like, you've got all the power within you as I do. So wake up, take responsibility for your life. That would be calling a spade and giving people a wake-up call. And I have to say, President Trump had no issue calling a spade, and people took issue with it because they're running this victimhood, want to perceive him in a negative light. He's got his issues for sure, but calling a spade, he was willing to do that and stand up for what's right, and calling out the corruptness in Washington for sure. So calling a spade calibrates at 475 on the map of consciousness. And it's different than wanting to be right and prove others wrong. The energy is much different. The wanting to be right and prove others wrong energy is coming from below 200, as opposed to calling a spade is 475, is a quantum leap above that. And what I have noticed is when someone calls a spade, it's like, there's no response, because you're in the presence of truth. You're like, you can't even respond to it. Like some people, will cower. Some might want to be belligerent and fight about it, but calling a spade, someone will just say it. They're not going to argue about it, and they're not going to be dissuaded from the truth. So last up on the map of consciousness is patriotism and love of country, which calibrates above 500. Let me give you the exact calibration. 520. Patriotism, love of country, and honor calibrates at 520 on the map of consciousness. So this is a super high level of consciousness. To operate above 500 is rare. This is true love. This is love energy running. It's a super powerful position. And to love your country is a powerful thing. You want to align with people that sincerely love their country and honor their country and honor the citizens and the Constitution of the United States and the Bill of Rights and all of that. You want people in office that will not stand for anything less. Again, what's going on now, there's a lot of people hating on the United States. That's nutty, right? You're disparaging the United States, that holds no truth, because they're operating from their own victimhood, and there's some delusional sense of power when people that are of even lower consciousness listen to you. It kind of feeds the ego, like, oh, I'm going to tell you what to do. And I've noticed on television, we have a weak president, by the way. The guy is a politician, period. He has no power, really. It's delusional power, and it's the house of cards. But I noticed that they're making everyone say, let's be clear. And the way they say it, I can tell it's a manipulation. It's the wolf in sheep's clothing. Let me be clear. Because they really have no confidence in what they're saying, and they flip-flop on everything. So that's a sign of weakness, is when you can't answer a question straight, without diversion and this, going on. You're dealing with someone who can't stand and is not courageous, has no integrity, and flip-flops. That's a sign of a corrupt politician. And weakness, the house of cards. There's no power to make change there. So apologist is 190. Anything below 200 holds no truth, holds no power. It's corrupted energy, essentially. Calling a spade is 475, which, by the way, I'm pretty sure is the same level of consciousness as being transparent. It's a very high level of consciousness to be transparent and speak the truth about yourself and anything else. And finally, love of country and honor. It calibrates at 520 on the map of consciousness, which is a quantum leap above an apologist, let me tell you. That's today's weekly dose of higher consciousness quiz. I hope you enjoyed it. If you want to continue subscribe to our YouTube channel at trumpetoftruth.tv.com or to our podcast at trumpetoftruthradio.com. I put out quizzes about almost every 3 weeks, or is it 4 weeks? I forget. Anyway, it's every 3 or 4 weeks. Once a month, you'll get a higher consciousness quiz. But I got a whole library of quizzes that you can go back to and start aligning yourself with truth in consciousness. See you later.